Chapter 761, We have a holiday on June 1st, promotion on June 1st and the release of the new game. What myth? Not long ago, many players answered the summons of some caring people and provided aid to the Orc Kingdom and the neighboring nations while dealing with their own businesses in the real world, which was why they had little time to play games. After they returned, these people found that the Burning Crusade, the new expansion of World of Warcraft, had been released for some time. The elves threw themselves into World of Warcraft all day long to catch up with other players, so they didn't have time for other stuff. These people didn't have time to notice other things until now. Due to his recent busy work, Mr. Dirk had just returned as well. At this moment, he pointed at the screen before him and said, "Didn't you watch it? It's the trailer for the new game." Immediately, he opened the trailer on his computer. Wow! A mystical realm on the myth level, players exclaimed while watching the ancient and grand scenes which reveal the desolation and bleakness at the beginning of the world where everything had just begun growing. I wonder how they made this mystical realm. An elf exclaimed, "Can we really play such a game?" The mysterious and powerful Blizzard Workshop and Soft Star Workshop had shown the greatness of gods in some mystical realms. For example, the Legend of Sword and Fairy showed the gods that seemed to have come from the East continent, and World of Warcraft showed the existences that were close to gods or at a godly level. However, the players had never seen or even heard of a mystical realm that presented a true mythical era. It was because there were few descriptions about such an era even in legends. It was extremely difficult to make a mystical realm in such a setting. Which workshop made it? How come your workshops are all so awesome? Except for some special abilities, most abilities in World of Warcraft were easy to learn, which was great for legions and military training. It was the case at least in the recent versions of the game where the max level cap was level 60 and level 70. Therefore, for Saint-level masters, the abilities were not so alluring as to the average players, unless they decided to change classes and worship Holy Light to learn those resurrection spells. With so many priests and paladins in World of Warcraft, only a few players had mastered the resurrection spells. Saint-level masters wouldn't give up their own system just to learn these spells. Besides, Saint-level masters were usually busy. Unlike average players, they didn't have time to stay in the shop all day long. Meanwhile, in the Elf Kingdom in Sylvan Forest, in the Royal Palace, First Elder Hyrule was carefully reading the documents about the Elf clan's business from different places, wearing a pair of round-framed glasses made of magic crystals. He looked like an old scholar. With care, he put stamps on the parchments and placed some of them aside for the Elf Queen to review. There was still a big pile of documents on the desk waiting for his attention. At this moment, his communication jade beeped on the desk. First Elder. A small reminder, a new mystical realm is just released, a mystical realm of the mythical era, Dark Souls 3. The message even had a trailer clip attached. Hyrule instantly stood up. Mythical era? He glanced at the documents on the desk. This is for me. This is for Her Majesty. I will stamp this one first. This needs Her Majesty's attention. Messages flooded the small discussion group in QQ for the Elf clan. Salah said, "I wonder when Elder Hyrule will come. First Elder is very busy lately, I'm afraid he can't play." In the Elder Chamber dash. This one is for me. Number. It's for Her Majesty. This one is. It's better for Her Majesty to take care of it. This one needs Her Majesty's attention as well. The small pile of parchment on his right-hand side began to grow taller. First Elder. At this moment, Elf Queen Kellyble walked in. Kellyble looked at the desk and was at a loss for words. After a pause, First Elder Hyrule said expressionlessly, "I put them in the wrong pile." He quickly took them back. Inside the new shop in Kanglan City, with the pace in World of Warcraft slowing down, a group of elves began to talk about the new game. Salah, when do you think the game will be released? The elves sat on the couches in the lounge area in a circle. Just for your ears. Salah waved at the others and told them to lean over. I heard from Xuanhuan that the shop owner calls this a warm-up. He will select a good date to release it. What date is a good date? Rolling, another member of the Snow Pigeon team, asked immediately. Xuanhuan said it's tomorrow. Salah revealed the news in a low voice. The shop owner said to Xuanhuan, tomorrow is a good day. Tomorrow is June 1st and your holiday. TL note, June 1st is Children's Day in China. Huh? Do we have a holiday tomorrow? The elves were delighted. At their homeland, June 1st is a holiday for people like us. Right. Salah said excitedly, it's said that all the games in the shop will have discounts tomorrow. The lowest is 30% off. If you buy 10 games, you'll get one old game or movie for free. Won't the shop owner lose lots of money? Rolling exclaimed, the stuff sold for 10 magic crystals will sell for only 7 magic crystals, which means that he will lose 3 magic crystals for each of the items he sells. Oh. Rolling took out money from her pocket and counted, tomorrow, I'll buy 10. At this moment, many people in the Radiant Light Godly Nation, Dylan Workshop, and Crystal Workshop were monitoring the shop closely. Outside the opened door, some figures were loitering. Hiss. The shop will lose 3 magic crystals from a mystical realm that originally cost 10 magic crystals. The customers will also get free stuff when buying 10 games. It means more losses. If 100,000 people come and buy stuff from the shop, isn't the shop going to go bankrupt? On the next day it was June 1st. The new shop and the old shops were all cleaned up and well decorated. For example, in the old shop in Xuanhuan City, Jessica and her companions, who were both official novel translators and janitors, were dressed in thick Disney teddy bear costumes. Ah, how come there are 3 bears? The big white deer laughed upon entering the shop. Oh, look over there. Jiangxi Oyu exclaimed when she saw a young man wearing a light helmet and holding a strange-shaped iron-boned umbrella. Myriad manifestation umbrella. There. Muking yelled, isn't that Jingtan's family? Wow, that's a Pikachu sitting there. In the new shop in Kanglan City, Salah exclaimed with stars in her eyes, let's sit over there. Sir, activate it for me. I want to activate 10 games. Rolling read the game list and said, my goodness, when were Dark Souls 1 and 2 released? Activate all 3 of them for me. Chapter 762, a group of newbies entered the game. Elf Queen Kellybull now understood that Sylvanas was only a fictional character in the mystical realm in World of Warcraft. As the queen of a kingdom that valued freedom, Kellybull didn't think that she needed to mind the business in a virtual world. However, as a good leader, Kellybull needed to obtain a deeper understanding of the needs of the citizens in the Elf Kingdom under her leadership. Meanwhile, she felt guilty that she only found out the key to the victory of the Alliance army after the war at the Lianshan Principality. Therefore, she decided to go and experience it in person. Meanwhile, in the Elder Hall where First Elder Hyrule lived, First Elder Hyrule straightened his robe and was about to set off. First Elder Elf Queen Kellybull walked over and asked, can you do me a favor? First Elder Hyrule froze for a second. Remembering the previous incident, he felt guilty and said immediately, I'll do my best. Wonderful. Kellybull took out a big pile of parchment from her storage space and placed them on First Elder Hyrule's desk. I have more important business to attend to, thank you very much. Then, she left in a hurry. First Elder Hyrule, who was ready to set off, stared at the desk in a daze and then at the direction that the Elf Queen had taken. He slumped onto his chair and murmured, Having stayed in the Elf Royal Palace for a long time, Kellybull thought that her knowledge about the world was outdated. After all, some things couldn't be understood by merely reading intelligence reports. Therefore, she felt it was necessary to know the world better, which was more important than dealing with the tedious documents and was an urgent business for her right now. 3 days are enough. Before she set off, she had made a good plan for her journey. but I can't let them know about it. Kellyble changed into exquisite body-fitting leather armor, took off her crown, and pulled her hair up in a neat ponytail. After holstering a long bow and a long sword, she changed her looks slightly with some spells and turned into a heroic-looking elf rogue. Although Saint-level masters were rare, this continent was vast with a large population, which meant that the number of Saint-level masters was not as little as one might imagine. After pushing open the door and entering the shop, Kellyble looked around and spotted a few Saint-level masters. Isn't that Street Wilson, the nation-protecting sword saint? Isn't that Street Sultan from Lianshan Principality? The stout middle-aged man looked elated while he made a list. Sir, I want these 10 games including all of the Dark Souls series. Please activate Dark Souls 3 for me. Mr. Fang was busy selling membership cards and activating the new game when a tall and slim female elf walked up. My name's Kelly, an elf rogue. Please activate Dark Souls 3 for me too. This elf, I didn't ask your name. How come you sound as if you are afraid that I would mistake you for someone else? A new elf. Mr. Fang took her money and activated the game for her with a puzzled expression. Kellyble came just in time. It was early morning, and many players of the Jua City Shop, Half City Shop, and Xuanhuan City Shop had just begun to try this game. Accompanied by a hymn-like song, the dark scene before the players looked extremely mysterious and weird. The deep bell toll added an inexplicable heaviness to the scene. Yes, indeed, it is called Lotharic, where the transitory lands of the Lords of Cinder converge. In venturing north, the pilgrims discover the truth of the old words, the fire fades and the lords go without thrones. When the link of the fire is threatened, the bell tolls, unearthing the old lords of cinders from their graves. Even though they didn't know what the old words were about, the players sensed that this was the beginning of a desolate and weird world where all life forms were being born from the simple introduction in the opening cinematics. They could tell that it was totally different from any world they had known about. One after another, the ancient lords of Cinder crawled out from their coffins, and big puddles of black wet mud oozed from its decrepit coffin. Aldrich, saint of the deep, in a ruined tomb covered by mist, tall and thin knights wearing unique helmets with sharp horns slowly stood up while leaning on their huge swords. Farron's undead legion, the Abyss Watchers. The ground quaked violently as a mountain-like figure sat up from an extremely huge stone coffin. Under the hooded chainmail that the giant wore on his head, there was a deep black hole on his face, and a hoarse roar came out from the black hole with a destructive storm. And the reclusive lord of the profaned capital, Yorm the giant. What's this? This scene had gone beyond every player's understanding of the world as they saw nothing but destruction and ruins. Even the kings and saints in this world were nightmarish existences. Elf Queen Kellyble and the other Saint-level masters shivered uncontrollably at this scene, wondering, what kind of world is this? The elves, knights, and some Saint-level masters who were watching the opening cinematics put down their virtual reality headsets subconsciously, looking around. They saw the same grimness and horror on each other's faces. Only, in truth, the lords will abandon their thrones. The ancient voice on the screen continued, and the unkindled will rise, nameless, accursed undead, unfit even to be cinder, and so it is, the dash seeketh embers. After choosing one's class, the bell tolled, the players controlled their own characters and climbed out of the unnamed ancient stone coffins in a bleak graveyard. The stone coffins and tablets that were randomly scattered on the ground and the grey lifeless valley filled with grey mist made the world look like a nightmare. If it was a myth and a legend, then it only existed in a world of nightmares. It looked even weirder and creepier than a nightmare. It was the opposite of the beautiful and prosperous land that the players knew about. It was full of darkness and despair, waiting for destruction. Undead. No. They were not undead since the deep sleep after death was a luxury for them. They were the nameless, accursed unkindled that were unfit to be lords of Cinder. After they died, they couldn't obtain a peaceful deep sleep. Instead, They were resurrected near the fire and continued to die again and again in this nightmarish world until their spirit collapsed and they became hollow corpses without consciousness. How come there is such a strange world? At this moment, Sudanji had turned on her live stream. With a horrified expression, she controlled her character to walk out cautiously. This looks scary. I'll try playing it for a while. Chapter 763, Fight the boss in Novice Village for 1 year. Come and check out the game that has the most value. The opening cinematics of Dark Souls 3 had a vague introduction, but the plot was easy to understand. The ancient lords of Cinder woke up from their tombs since they shouldered the duty to rekindle the fire. However, these lords of Cinder didn't want to fulfill their duties. At this moment, the accursed unkindled who couldn't become lords of Cinder woke up from deep sleep and came out from the tombs of ashes, following the route that the lords of Cinder took. They must return these lords to their thrones. This was the basic storyline of Dark Souls 3. As for the destiny of the Lords of Cinder and why they didn't want to take the glorious thrones of lords, it was easy to understand when the players saw the words Cinder and Link the Fire. They would have to burn themselves up to rekindle the fire. The origin of linking the fire could be traced back to the very ancient times, as shown in Dark Souls 1. Fire brought everything to the world, and the creatures that first discovered fire had gained extremely great power from it. These creatures were the first group of gods in this world. However, fire would eventually die out, which would mean the end of the world. To stop the invasion of darkness, Gwyn, a lord of Cinder, the first god who had gained the golden lightning power from the first flame and was the leader of the godly race, chose to burn his powerful soul to maintain the fire. That was why not everyone could link the fire. Each lord of Cinder had to be one of the top existences of the world or even a god. Containing the power of the first flame, these beings were the most powerful existences. Some of them were powerful gods or existences more powerful than gods. The unkindled as the name indicated, were not strong enough to rekindle the flame, and thus were existences who were as lowly as ash. These were the characters that the players controlled. It was why the old words said, "Ash seeketh ember." Therefore, Dark Souls was totally different from any game that the shop had previously released, either in the world views or the battle styles. When facing an existence who was countless times more powerful than you could only rely on battle skills that could even subdue gods and the moderate growth in strength that you obtained during the process. The only thing that you could use to help you battle to the end was probably the rusty weapon that you had when you climbed out from the tomb. You must rely on these things to kill the gods. Minksu said that this game is super difficult. Salah and some elves were talking about the game. The other newbies in Mr. Fang's shops obviously hadn't realized this. Difficult? Alden and other Cent-level masters sitting nearby said in amusement, "I think it might be only difficult for average people. We're Saint-level masters, and raiding instances in World of Warcraft was quite easy." Elf Queen Kelly Bull also thought, "I'm close to the pinnacle stage of Saint level. How can a mystical realm be difficult for me? There are grave goods, gemstones." Kelly Bull felt that it was cheating to be given such good items at the beginning of the game, therefore, she chose to take nothing. After choosing to be a sorceress, she entered the game. The Cemetery of Ash was located in a desolate valley. Besides the players, there were only a few deserted corpses that lost their mind, which was the inevitable fate for the unkindled. At this moment, Elf Queen Kelly Bull was dressed in a slightly dirty white robe with a small round shield in one hand and a slim sword that looked like a decor piece in the other hand. Obviously, elves liked these kinds of swords. Due to her current low level, she didn't have magic spells, but elves could cast spells as well as fight in close range. Disturbed by her steps, a mindless deserted corpse lunged at her with a snarl. Kelly Bull cast the initial sorcery, Soul Arrow, and pierced the corpse's chest with a streak of pale blue magic light. Then, she killed it with a clean sword slash. Simple. She was still uncomfortable that her strength was reduced to that of an average person. Putting down her virtual reality headset, she looked around and mumbled, "Who said that this game was difficult? It's simple in the beginning." Having finished his instant noodles at the counter, Mr. Fang was walking toward his computer. He glanced at her when passing by and said, "This is the tutorial for new players. It teaches you some basic controls, and there is a boss for new players. It's simple." "Is it so? I have to fight my way to the later stages if I want to challenge something difficult?" Kellyble looked displeased, wondering why she couldn't directly skip to the more difficult stages. Anyway, she had to find the easy boss for new players first. Walking out of the cemetery of ash, she saw a narrow mountainous path. The terrain was simple but very dim. If she didn't venture to the branch paths, she could easily find the path out of the cemetery. The tall and thick city walls and the huge stone arch gate guarded by a few deserted corpses formed the portal leading to the outside world. Walking through the gate, Kellyble saw a big round square. In the center of the square was a giant wearing heavy armor which appeared to be made of neither gold nor stone. Right now, this giant was half kneeling. Even when half kneeling, this giant was much taller than her. It was silent as if it was dead. However, the black tentacle-like things on its back seemed to be moving. "Sir, I can go out after defeating this thing, right?" Seeing Mr. Fang sitting not far from her, Kellyble put down her virtual reality headset and called out to him. "Right, that's you, Dex Gundy," Mr. Fang called out. Many years had passed, but Mr. Fang still remembered the full name of the boss in the tutorial. "How do I fight it?" Kellyble looked at it. "Should I pull out the sword from its chest?" After asking that question, she slowly pulled the coiled sword from the giant's chest with all her strength. The giant seemed to recover its senses and slowly stood up. Kellyble could see its pitch black and distorted demonic face and the black and cold eyes behind the grey helmet that seemed to have come from an abyss. When it lifted the huge halberd that was almost 6 meters long, the warrior who seemed to have come from the ancient times and had survived many horrifying battles came back to life. Kellyble's heart lurched. Gertie was nimbler than she expected and brandished his huge halberd, creating whistling sounds. Looking down at her slim sword that was as small as a toothpick, her ragged sorceress robe, and the small round shield which had been smashed to an unrecognizable shape, Kellyble was petrified. With a scream, she ran toward the gate that she walked through but found that it was sealed by magic. She hammered at the gate wildly. Gundy bent its knees a bit and leapt up into the sky like a cannonball. Then, it struck down its 6-meter-long halberd with vicious force. Boom. 10 seconds later dash. A cold corpse lay on the ground, and a line of bloody words appeared on Kellyble's screen, "You died." 10 hours later. Having played games for an entire day, Mr. Fang stretched and stood up to get something to eat. He glanced at Kellyble's screen when walking past here. "You're still in the novice village?" Kellyble was at a loss for words. While gritting her teeth, she turned her head and glared at Mr. Fang with murderous spirit. Chapter 764. You think you're great after defeating Gundy. Everyone gets a lesson in the novice village. Is this really a tutorial for beginners? Streetleton was feeling dizzy. On his screen, a figure in ragged knight armor fell and rolled on the ground as the boss chased after him. At this moment, Gundy's upper body expanded and turned into a skinless monster that looked like a dragon or a snake, and its body was covered in black pus. When it swung its head and tail, more than half of the big arena became a death zone. With eyes emitting vicious red light, it ravaged its opponent wildly even after the latter was dead, shattering the body and the ground to dust. You told me that this is a tutorial for beginners? At this moment, he had the urge to return to the coffin. By now, most players had reached the limit of playtime for today. Is this mystical realm for people to use? Kellyble was still thinking about how to fight Gundy when she got offline, wondering if anyone could defeat it. She thought to herself, after all, I'm a saint-level master, Since I can't pass it, no one could defeat this boss, right? At this moment, she heard an exclamation. My goodness, someone passed it. What? Following the sound, she saw a large group of elves sitting on the couches in the lounge area with some knights from the Golden Griffin Knight Legion. They were watching the live stream from the continent of Immortal Relic. Some of them are super powerful. Commander Elven exclaimed in astonishment. This senior has passed it for a while now. Salah pointed at her communication jade and said, Kellybull almost died of shame and humiliation. How come some people are so powerful? Instantly, she had the feeling that her elves would follow others if she didn't work hard. Of course, as the queen of the elf clan, she hoped that these elves would admire her. On the next day, before Mr. Fang opened the door, he saw an elf standing outside. How come she is so eager to play? Fang Chi found that this elf came by herself every day. Don't you have friends to come with you? Mr. Fang asked while opening the door. Ignoring him, Kellybull hurried over to a computer. She looked haughty and had the presence that she was busy and didn't want to talk. Since someone passed it, I just don't believe that I can't do it. After all, she had reached the saint level, which meant that her talent wasn't poor. After her practice all day long yesterday, she had accumulated some experience. A while later, after dying many times, the battered character controlled by Kellybull narrowly dodged Gundy's swipe with its huge withered claws. She rolled sideways and got close to Gundy, deciding to head into danger and risk it all for the chance to win. She thrust out her sword. I passed it, she exclaimed while wiping her sweat. The elves were always alert to all kinds of disturbances in the shop. Sure enough, a group of elves walked over with bowls of instant noodles in their hands. On the screen, Gundy's huge body fell down, and some of the strength in the corpse and soul was drawn out and absorbed by the player, which could be used to increase their stats later on. Of course, the collected souls could be used as the unique currency in this world to buy items as well. Meanwhile, the embers in Gundy's body gradually lit up in the body of the character that Kellybull controlled. Through the looted ember, the players could increase their max HP. Kellybull had indeed passed the stage. My goodness, how did you pass it? One elf asked humbly. Ha 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 ha. Kellybull felt satisfied but remained calm on the surface, acting like she was still engrossed in the game. This, Kellybull earnestly concluded while she continued playing, this is in fact not difficult. Different from other games, this game almost had no shortcuts. The players must completely rely on their own battle skills, combat techniques, and meticulous control of details. At this moment, the character that Kellybull controlled finally pushed open the huge stone gate that had been sealed for many years behind Gundy. As a heavy boom noise sounded, she finally saw the world outside the gate. Walking up along the mountainous path, she saw an ancient stone hall, Firelink Shrine. When the coiled sword was inserted into the center of the shrine and the bonfire was lit up, the journey for the tutorial would come to an end. Opposite to the entrance of the Firelink Shrine were 5 huge thrones under the illumination of randomly placed white candles. These were the thrones for the Lords of Cinder. A crestfallen warrior sat beside the thrones. The Firelink Shrine had only an entrance but no exit or any other paths leading to the outside. Skills. Can you explain it in detail? Salah asked while watching this strange elf play the game. Obviously, she had been stuck at Gundy for a long time now. Of course. Elf Queen Kellybull had been admired and praised by elves all day long before, but she had felt nothing special at the time. But now, she had a great sense of achievement. Let me find a boss who is more powerful than this one. At this moment, many more players walked over and watched her play. Someone in our shop passed it too? Helen asked in surprise. Yeah, she might be the first one in our shop. A few saint-level masters also looked over. There was no exit in the Firelink Shrine, and Kellybull came back after walking around it. Of course, the deserted corpses outside were not her targets. She walked up along the path on the left-hand side close to the cliff and saw a person totally different from the deserted corpses. This monster looks different. I'll use it as an example to show you the skills. After all, she had killed the boss, which meant that she was unrivaled in this novice village. Okay. The viewers behind her nodded repeatedly. On the path of the cliff, a thin man wearing ragged clothes walked over with a long saber. He looked even worse than a beggar. Here. While holding her slim sword, Kellyble explained confidently, the most important thing about battle skills is that you must control your movements meticulously and understand yourself better. When you can control your movements perfectly, you can deal with any enemies with ease. With that said, she stabbed at the opponent when the latter came within her attack range. Clank. Her saber light flashed, and a muffled noise sounded. Her sword was sent flying. Since she grasped onto her sword tightly, her arms moved back as well. A strange force bounced back all her force, and her whole body turned numb as if she had been smashed by a huge hammer. Then, she watched as her opponent pierced the saber into her chest. Words appeared on her screen, "You died." Dumbfounded, Kellyble looked at the screen with a dull expression. Everyone behind her was at a loss for words. Chapter 765, Who dares to call me an entertainment streamer? Watch me open the treasure chest. Huh? How come you couldn't defeat a weak hollow? The elves watching from behind looked contemptuous. This person was wearing ragged clothes, looking only a bit more powerful than the hollows. Of course, hollows were weak only in comparison. They could dodge, sneak attack, pretend to be dead, and summon other hollows for help. Sometimes, players would be caught by surprise with an arrow in the head. Without questions, these arrows were shot by hollow archers hiding in a corner while the hollow soldiers standing outside diverted the player's attention. So, they were weak only in comparison with other enemies in Dark Souls. This one looks more powerful than the average hollow. Is it an elite hollow? The elves standing behind her murmured to each other. She was instantly killed by an elite hollow after defeating Gundyr, which means that she must have passed it with luck. Let's go. I don't want to watch it anymore, one elf said. I passed it with luck? Indignant, Kellyble resurrected and raced to the elite hollow again with gritted teeth, determined to kill it today. I was careless. She yelled, I assure you that I can pass it this time. She ran to the thin man who was dressed in ragged clothes and holding a long saber. As long as I control my movements well and watch out for his attacks, he can't hit me. This time, Kellyble was obviously more cautious. Meanwhile, Mr. Fang was checking his bag after killing the boss. He glanced at a piece of ragged clothes accidentally and saw 2 lines in the item description. A terribly worn shirt. Men are fond of weaving tales to explain the raggedness of their garb. My sixth sense warned me of danger, and I danced between flurries of blades, unscathed, but alas, my clothes went to tatters. 1 day later. There was not a single elf watching Kellyble play. Mr. Fang glanced at her screen when passing by. How come you're still in the novice village? Can't you keep your mouth shut? She almost exploded in anger. Several days later, some saint-level masters gathered in the lounge area of the shop. Have you passed the tutorial for the beginners? Don't even mention it. After I defeated Gundyr, I got out just now after being beaten for a whole day by that sword master. I'm in a worse situation. Another saint-level master complained in tears. I thought that the crestfallen warrior sitting by the thrones of Lords of Cinder was an enemy, and I struck at him twice. Now, I deleted my account and started again. Why? He hunted me down each time I resurrected, again and again. The saint-level master looked to be on the verge of a mental collapse. I haven't been able to defeat it yet. They had been tortured mercilessly in the game. No. Streetleton thought it wasn't fair that they were tortured alone. Street Wilson, Streetleton, and the other saint-level masters exchanged a look in the lounge area and found that they shared the same thought. We can recommend this mystical realm to other people. Instantly, They sat closer in a circle and discussed in low voices. How about Street Willy? Street Willy was the president of the World Magic Union and one of the ultimate figures. Mr. Saladin is also good. Eldon said. Yeah? The others instantly looked at each other and had the tactical understanding. How about Miss Joanna from the Alchemist Union? They were talking about the mature-looking woman dressed in a fiery red mage's robe who also had participated in the war against the Shadow Legion. How about Street Hematon? World Mage Hematon was also called Proud Hematon, which meant that he was a man who took great pride in himself. And how about, ha 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 ha. The atmosphere in the lounge area instantly turned from suffocating to cheerful. While the Saint-level masters were stuck in the first stage for a long time in the old shop, the players in the old shops obviously fared much better. At this moment, a dog-headed man was intently watching a live stream on his communication jade while sitting on the sofa. Sitting nearby, the elves and knights each held a communication jade, and they were also engrossed in live streams. The players could teleport from the bonfire in the Firelink Shrine to the high wall of Lotharic. Only by coming to this grand wall did the players truly walk out of the novice zone. There were only hollows on the abandoned city walls which were as wide as streets on which 4 horse-drawn carriages could travel on in parallel. A huge dragon's corpse was left dried up and weathered on the wall. Countless hollowed corpses kneeled before the huge dragon, like pilgrims. Rowling was now watching Sutanji's live stream. How is this streamer? Xiaoyu said that she is an entertainment streamer, Sala said. At this moment, Sutanji was playing the game connected with Nalan Mingsu and some other players. Dark Souls could be played online. Each player's game world was like a parallel plane. When a player left a sign on the ground, other players with embers could see the sign and summon the player who had made the sign to their own world in the form of spirits. Of course, some NPCs also left signs since the players were not the only unkindled ashes in this world. It says that she is a technical streamer. Rowling glanced at the streamer introduction. At this moment, Sutanji controlled her game character to cleanly kill the deserted corpses on the high wall with her teammates. Meanwhile, she said, how come I feel like some people keep saying that I'm an entertainment streamer? A row of bullet comments shot up. That's a good assessment. Who said that? Well said. You bunch of haters, I'm furious. While brushing back her slightly messy, wind-blown hair, Sutanji looked forward and saw a huge fire-breathing dragon close to 100 meters long was coiled on the top of the high wall. Below it, the door to the round tower was locked. Hollow corpses and pus-covered creatures like Gundi were everywhere in this abandoned city. Despite the danger and mysteries that seemed to lurk everywhere, people couldn't help wondering if some treasures were hidden in this place. The dragon spat out fire and burned most of the monsters on the city wall to ashes. Guys, look, do you think the dragon is guarding some treasures? Sutanji's acute senses seemed to detect something. Otherwise, it wouldn't be coiling up there. Here's the plan. You guys divert the attention of the dragon, and I'll slip down to the round tower to check it out. Sutanji thought that she needed to show off some of her techniques. Otherwise, people will always think that I'm an entertainment streamer. Nalan Mingsu gave her a okay-handed gesture. Then, she ran down the path beneath the huge dragon. Sure enough, the huge dragon inhaled deeply and then spat fire. At this moment, Nalan Mingsu had run to the guard tower on the opposite side. The wall of the guard tower was so thick that even dragon fire couldn't penetrate it. Meanwhile, Sutanji slipped into the building under the huge dragon. What do you think of my techniques? Sutanji said smugly. This streamer seems to have good techniques. Rowling exclaimed. Sutanji opened the iron door and saw an old deserted room. It was messy with some old and used items, which showed that this room had once been used by someone. At first glance, there seemed to have nothing valuable in it. Then, she spotted a giant old chest on the first floor below her. Oh, there were indeed treasures. Sutanji's beautiful eyes lit up. Walking to the chest, she opened it and said smugly, "Am I not awesome? This is called intuition. I'll see who dares to call me entertainment stray, you. Before she could finish, the chest opened its huge mouth full of sharp teeth and swallowed her. The viewers saw Xuanhuan's legs wildly kicking around outside the chest. Woo. Then, her legs straightened and turned stiff. You died. Chapter 766. The choice between obligation and destiny, Farron's Undead Legion. Have you found treasures? Xuanhuan was silent. Bullet comments flooded the screen in her live stream room. Thanks to Entertainment Elder for the gift of awesome. Thanks to. How did you die? How come so many people are showering you with gifts again? Nalan Mingsu and the others were stupefied. I don't know. Xuanhuan didn't know what to say. You guys come here. When I opened the treasure chest, it turned into a monster. The chest turned into a monster? After putting down her virtual reality headset, Nalan Mingsu looked over and saw on Xuanhuan's screen that the treasure chest stood up and changed into a pitch-black thin monster with a big tongue dangling out of its mouth. It was wandering in the room right now. We're coming. Using the same tactic, Nalan Mingsu dodged the huge dragon's fire and dashed into the room. Then, she heard the monster's deep snarls. Then, she went downstairs. Suddenly, she heard a strong wind howling sound. Boom! Nalan Mingsu felt as if her whole body was struck by a meteorite. Even the extremely hard wall behind her was shattered into dust. Words appeared on her screen. You died. She was stupefied. Even the viewers in the new shop were dazed. How come you're dead too? Song Kingfeng, who was still outside, froze. I was killed instantly. He looked over at Nalan Mingsu's screen and saw that her whole body was smashed into the wall. Instantly, they sensed deep malice and a scheme. Meanwhile, Mr. Fang had just beaten the boss before him to near death and then put on the helm that resembled the mimic chests. The description flashed across the item. Symbol of avarice, head of the avaricious creature that mimics treasure chests. The ancient godly race, the very form of this creature is thought to be a form of brand, a punishment for sin, perhaps affected by the imminent fall of darkness, the dying flame, or the curse of the unkindled. They finally became such monsters after death. Different from other games, in Dark Souls, the players could go through the main storyline without knowing anything except for linking fire. In fact, the players didn't even need to know why they were doing this. However, if the players collected the objects, items, and souls, they would get the complete story about the world by piecing together the information and clues that these things provided. These things contained countless heavy and dark stories from the ancient times. After leaving Firelink Shrine, the player's mission was to bring back the Lords of Cinder. In the meantime, the players embarked on a journey of exploration of the whole dark world. Walking down the high wall of Lotharic, one could see a huge abandoned hall where the hard and thick floor had been smashed several feet down into the ground by something. Zhongwu, Gatinian, and others stood in the hall with grim expressions. A hill-like wild beast wearing thick ice armor roared before them with a huge hammer in its hand. It spat out frost air which instantly swept across the whole hall. Meanwhile, Mr. Fang returned to the Firelink Shrine and handed a soul to the only remaining Lord of Cinders, Ludoleth of Corland, who was a pygmy. In Dark Souls, the pygmies referred to humans since all the other races were taller than humans. The soul burned like flames. When it was picked up, there was the item description. Vort was once an outrider knight who served under Pontiff Xuanhuan. He served alongside the Dancer of the Boreal Valley until their transformation. Soon, it was turned into a ring that had a weird black eye on it. Pontiff's right eye. Bewitched ring that Pontiff Xuanhuan bestowed upon his knights. Knights who peer into the black orb are lured into battles of death, transformed into frenzied beasts. No wonder the Pontiff only provides these rings to those dispatched to foreign lands. That was the general idea of the story. If the players explored deeper into the world, they would gather more information about the plot little by little. According to the progress of the game, the first Lord of Cinder that they would encounter was Farron's undead legion, the Abyss Watchers. Next, they would encounter Aldrich, who devoured gods. Then, the Yorm, the giant of the profaned capital. Afterward, it was the Prince of Lothric. The final part was the story of the main character, the nameless person without a past. Right now, the players had just defeated the first few bosses and were at the stage of the Abyss and Farron's undead legion. In fact, ever since their encounter with Gundy, the players began to get in touch with the Abyss. The horrifying people covered in pus were the result of the erosion by the Abyss. The power of Abyss originated from darkness, it came even earlier than the first flame. At this moment, Salah and other elves were progressing very slowly in the game, but it didn't stop them from watching live streams. They were now sitting on the couches in the lounge area in a circle. Look at this senior. Obviously, they were watching Nalan Hongwu's live stream. Nalan Hongwu had obviously played Dark Souls 1 and thus had more advantages over others. The players walked out of the gate behind the Boreal Valley, flew over Lothric City, which was divided into two halves by the Broken Mountain, and walked through the Crucifixion Woods and down the Road of Sacrifice. Then, they would reach Farron Keep. This was the front line of resisting the Abyss. Salah was now watching the live stream in which the crestfallen warrior in Firelink Shrine was telling the information about Farron's undead legion with a mocking and somewhat sad tone. Gaining admission to the legion is a matter of some ceremony. Inside their keep, snuffing out the flames of 3 altars opens the door to the wolf blood, sworn by the wolf's blood to contain the Abyss. The legion will bury a kingdom at the first sign of exposure. The initial mission of Farron's undead legion, Watchers of Abyss, was monitoring the Abyss. When the bell tolled, they woke up from deep sleep. In confusion, they sensed the restlessness in the Abyss under Farron Keep and chose to perform their initial mission. They crawled out from their tombs and returned to their previous posts. On the screen of the live stream. At this moment, more people walked over and stood behind them, including some newly arrived Saint-level masters. Salah glanced back. So many people? At this moment, Nalan Hongwu controlled his character to push open the gate which had been sealed for many years. They saw such a scene. Piles of corpses were inside, and the horrid army that could easily destroy a nation now only had a few of its members remaining standing. The tall captain pierced one of its comrades through the chest with his huge sword, and the corpse slowly fell down. Then, another one got up with dark eyes that had crimson lights flashing in them. When you look long into an abyss, the abyss looks into you. None of them could escape the fate of being eroded by the abyss. The unkindled resurrected endlessly, and the captain, the only one who had consciousness, had to kill his teammates again and again. At this moment, he seemed to notice that someone had extinguished flames of 3 altars and came in through the gate. He slowly turned around, with his huge sword in his right hand pointing forward and his dagger in his left hand resting on his right arm. This man performed the unique greeting gesture of the Undead Legion, to perform his obligation or accept the destiny to link the fire. All this would be decided by this battle. Chapter 767, Farron's Breakdance Crew, teaching awkward dance online. They'd have us seek the Lords of Cinder and return them to their molding thrones, but we're talking true legends with the metal to link the fire. We're not fit to lick their boots. Don't you think? Just as the crestfallen warrior in the Firelink Shrine said, many nameless people without past or future crawled out from their tombs. One day, they might silently turn into deserted corpses on their way and never regain their senses again. Death was their eternal companion. Gundy, Vort of the Boreal Valley, the stinky and poisonous swamp in Farron Keep, the omnipresent basilisks that could cast curses and cause instant death, and the most ancient dark wraiths. All players, regardless if they were newbies or veterans, had to go through hundreds of deaths before they could come before the first Lord of Cinder, Farron's Undead Legion. Each battle with an enemy or a boss was a fierce combat. Obviously, Nalan Hongwu had gone through countless deaths before he came here. This might be the most dangerous experience for him, so he acted extremely cautious. In fact, the process was so torturous that even Kellybull, a saint-level master, wanted to quit the game at this moment. After all, they were knocked down on the ground and tortured by all kinds of enemies and bosses each day. Salah and the other elves were even worse. Over 90% of them were forced into defeat by Gundy. They felt like they might not be able to clear the stage for the rest of their lives. However, this didn't stop them from watching others clear stages on live stream. Meanwhile, the famous streamer Mr. Dirk obviously didn't want to be a lazy player. After all, everyone was now talking about this new game. Therefore, he sat on a couch and watched the live stream carefully to get himself familiar with the process, so he wouldn't be tortured too much when he did his own live stream. Almost every battle in Dark Souls was a fight against an opponent much stronger than oneself. At this moment, Nalan Hongwu held his dark sword and performed a military salute at his opponent. Seeing this scene, the viewers felt that this legion might not be a great lord, but they were definitely a group of competent soldiers. These beings were admirable regardless of which choice they made, whether they did what they did due to their obligation as soldiers or their destinies as lords. Only Nalan Hongwu, a veteran military man, could relate to their dilemma. Two swordsmen dressed in the Undead Legion's unique red capes and helms with pointy horns charged at Nalan Hongwu with strange steps. They used a moveset associated with the Farron Great Sword, different from the two-handed swords that were as thick as a door in Final Fantasy. These huge swords that were nearly 2 meters long didn't look heavy. The blades were as thick as an arm, and they could cover a large area around the user while also being very nimble. The daggers in their left hands could make up for most of their weak spots when they slashed out with the great swords. The silver sword light covered dozens of meters in one instant like a waterfall. Meanwhile, Nalan Hongwu reacted quickly by clearly rolling out of the attack range. The stones on the ground exploded into debris by this sword strike. Obviously, Nalan Hongwu made a small mistake in judgment. The slashing blade thrust up heavily toward him again as dust and whistling debris permeated the air. The swiftness and the perfect control of movements were astonishing. Even if they were at the same level of strength, it was extremely difficult for Nalan Hongwu to fight such an opponent who was experienced and used excellent sword techniques. Not to mention that Nalan Hongwu's physical strength and speed were inferior to those of his opponent. At this moment, a sword beam shot across the whole battleground like a shooting star and pierced his arm instantly. With red lights flashing in his eyes, this figure was a member of the Undead Legion who had been eroded by the Abyss and was being resurrected again and again. As the captain of Farron's Undead Legion, he had to accept the tragic fate that he must fight his former comrades and pierce their chests with swords. The battle continued. Since the duel became a chaotic battle of 3 sides, the pressure on Nalan Hongwu greatly decreased. Finally, the Abyss Watchers tried to get up but couldn't. Eventually, he dropped to the ground listlessly. He died just like this. For some reason, the elves only felt deep sorrow instead of the joy of victory for clearing the stage. Even Nalan Hongwu was silent. Perhaps these people also hoped that this admirable legion could die with dignity. At this moment, they saw flames lighting up. Above the countless silent corpses on the ground, lots of wolf blood flew into midair and gathered in one direction. Flames lit up on the capes and sets of armor. The sparks of fire illuminated the dark like countless fireflies in the darkness. A blazing flame instantly shot out from the sword handle and swallowed the body of the sword like a crimson fire pillar. Supporting his weight with the long sword of flame, the fallen soldier returned. He slowly got up from the ground, just like when the god valiantly issued a challenge to the abyss and the endless darkness many years ago. But this time, his eyes had turned blood red. By now, the darkness from the abyss had devoured the consciousness of all the Legion members. However, this was the true power of a Lord of Cinder. The real duel had just begun. Engulfed by blazing flames, the huge sword was waved high in the air, lighting up the dim hall. My goodness. At this moment, even Kellybull, Ulden, and other Cent-level masters were staring at the screen without blinking. The heated flames seemed to burn up the air as the big sword of flame that was over 2 meters long was swung, attacking viciously and making it hard for his opponent to even breath. My goodness, how did he do this? A dog-headed man on the side yelled in astonishment as he watched the member of Farron's undead legion on the screen dodging several of Nalan Hongwu's sword strikes with extremely weird steps. Not only the elves, but glints flashed in the eyes of the saint-level masters behind them. Ah, this sword technique is so cool! Salah exclaimed. The battle finally ended after a long time. Then, the viewers watched as Nalan Hongwu went to the Firelink Shrine and traded the soul of Farron's undead legion for a big sword of the same style. As if he had instantly mastered this sword technique, he brandished the sword in Firelink Shrine with weird steps. This is the sword technique. Even Streetleton, who was standing in the back, exclaimed, "Can we learn it? Watch me, the first move is like this." Salah copied the move while still watching the live stream. Watch me, these are the next 2 moves. The elves copied the moves in the shop with elegant steps. No, it's like this. Beside them, the saint-level masters obviously had better imitation. What are you guys doing here? At this moment, Mr. Fang walked over. If you want to dance awkwardly, do it outside. He mumbled in displeasure. Really? Learning Farron's breakdance crew's dance moves, and dancing in my shop? With more acute hearing than others, Kellybull suddenly froze and paused her dance. Then, she looked at the elves who were spinning and leaping with sticks they had obtained from somewhere. Can't you keep your mouth shut? Kellybull's face twitched in fury. Chapter 768, Embarking on the Mythical Journey, Aldrich, Devourer of Gods. Then, Kellybull saw the group of elves saying to each other, "Let's go out, ignore the shop owner." The elves all went outside to continue with their spinning and leaping. Next, Mr. Fang saw the female elf rogue who claimed that her name was Kelly having a hopeless expression on her face. Different from other games, in Dark Souls, the players learned and used battle skills and sword techniques with corresponding weapons. They learned spells through special spell scrolls. With the talents of the main character, the players could use the corresponding sword technique after they got their hand on the Farron Greatsword. Although they were all nameless people, as main characters, they still had some talents such as the growth in combat techniques and the use of battle skills and spells mentioned above. These talents relieved some pressure from the players, otherwise, they wouldn't be able to clear the stage all their lives. Be they lord or legend, the curse shows no mercy. What a sham. Farron Undead Legion's swords and armor which contained their power before they died were placed on their throne. Seeing this scene, the crestfallen warrior who had told the main character how to traverse Farron Keep lamented self-mockingly. Yes, this was the destiny of the Lords of Cinder. It had to be mentioned that all through the game, each battle was a test to the limit for the players. After watching the live stream, the new players who were level 9 and the saint-level masters began to adjust their state and obtained quite a lot of inspiration. Also, some of their habits got influenced and changed during the process. For example, after watching that Nalan Hongwu killed Farron's undead legion with the dark sword, the embarrassing dog-headed man felt that the dark sword was indeed powerful and even changed the name of his live stream from Dark Souls 3 to Dark Sword 3. Now, he was on Dark Sword 3 Episode 10. Meanwhile, the elves were working hard in the game in order to get the breakdance Greatsword. The Greatsword that contained the sword technique of Farron's Undead Legion was jokingly called the Breakdance Greatsword by Mr. Fang, but it had great abilities in the game. For example, when the players battled with the nightmarish Black Knight, they could dodge the opponent's attacks and counterattack easily with this sword technique and corresponding movements. Therefore, when you see someone dancing awkwardly in front of you, never underestimate your opponent, otherwise, you have a very high probability of dying tragically. However, for the real masters, they could use any weapons they liked as long as they mastered them. When the players returned with the remains of Farron's undead legion and opened the catacombs of Carthus, which was a nation that had been devoured by the abyss, they embarked on their journey to bring back the remains of the second Lord of Cinder. The entire second section of the game belonged to Pontiff Xuanhuan. This might be the most powerful and most terrifying enemy whom the players will encounter so far. Xuanhuan came from the painted world of Ariandel, which was a place covered in ice and a shelter for wandering and despairing people from the real world. That world was full of refugees who had nothing with them. These people got comfortable in conformity and became eroded by this comfortable lifestyle. It was why this ambitious young sorcerer didn't fit in this world. Therefore, this ambitious sorcerer left the painted world. He came to the ruins of the previously prosperous kingdom of giants. The only thing left was the burning profaned flame. The flame is profaned since its eternal burning violates the natural laws. The flame contains the great power of abyss which can erode people's minds and trigger evil with its great power. Note, this should be a description found in the game, but I can't find it anywhere. As described by the words on the item, Xuanhuan dug out the ruins of the profaned capital by accident. When Xuanhuan left the profaned capital, he was no longer the young man who had just walked out of the painted world. His unfading ambition now blazed like the profaned flame. With a great sword engulfed in the profaned flame and the ambition stained by the abyss, he turned his eyes toward Earthhill. Deduced from some information and clues, Earthhill was probably the royal city of the ancient the Lord of Cinder Gwyn, and Orlando. Undoubtedly, there lived the descendants of Gwyn, including the Sun Princess Guinevere and her Silver Knights, Dark Sun Gwyndolin and his Dark Moon Blades, and their sister Yoshka. In the ancient times, Gwyn's knights and the royal members lived on this land of kings, and it had been one of the most prosperous cities in the world. Silver Knights guarded the cathedral, and Smorf, one of the 4 knights of Gwyn, was also stationed here. However, this great city experienced a great change after Xuanhuan arrived. No one had expected that this sorcerer who came from a distant place would erode the whole dynasty. The mysterious illness of Gwyndolin made him lose control over the Blade of the Dark Moon Covenant, and the Way of White Priests couldn't escape Xuanhuan's control. Also, Archdeacon McDonnell discovered the deep spell, and it helped him release a weird magic from human dregs and erode the priests. Slowly, gradually, Xuanhuan's true intentions began to be revealed. Earthhill was full of residents who had been turned into enslaved undead, and even worse, wild beasts. Some were even turned into spider-like creatures with skeleton bodies and barely recognizable human faces. Gwyndolin's Outrider Knights also ended tragically. For example, the Dancer of the Boreal Valley was a royal descendant of Irithyll, and so was Vort of the Boreal Valley, who accompanied the dancer all year round. Eventually, Smorf, one of Gwyn's 4 knights, and Gwyn's second son Gwyndolin, had also become food to be devoured. It was how Aldrich, Devourer of Gods, got its name. Stepping into the deep cathedral, the players could see the upper body of Gwyndolin propped up by mud-like lower body. These were the enemies that the players were going to face: Pontiff Xuanhuan and Aldrich, Devourer of Gods. Undoubtedly, engaging in a battle with such enemies was like a myth and a legend in itself. As the game went on, the players went through countless hardships and deaths, traveled through the catacombs of Carthus, and came to Irithyll, under the moonlight and looking at the cold city that had once been extremely prosperous and powerful. Even the saint-level masters began breathing heavily without them knowing. Chapter 769. Elves begin to dance awkwardly with instructor Xuanhuan. Different from Farron's undead legion, the second Lord of Cinder Aldrich didn't intend to link the fire. Instead, it hoped that the first flame would die out. It even foresaw the deep ocean era after the first flame extinguished. In this era, an ocean would swallow the land, and darkness would swallow light. However, Pontiff Xuanhuan hoped that the profaned flame would burn up the whole world. In short, the former thought that the end would come sooner or later and would rather protect himself. and the latter intended to take the throne with his blazing ambition and conspiracies and finish the last gods, ending the era of fire by allowing darkness to devour the light. They were waiting for the first flame to die out and the darkness to fall. It was impossible to ask them to link the fire. Besides, they even encouraged more unkindled to join the Church of the Deep and kill the supporters of Firelink. Gradually, Kellybull had also fought her way to Irithil. Sitting in a corner alone, she was happily dancing with the breakdance greatsword in her hand against a Pontiff Knight on the screen. After killing one with embarrassment, she drew another Pontiff Knight, enjoying herself very much. Dancing awkwardly? At this moment, a voice came from behind her. "Hey!" She scrambled to put away the breakdance greatsword and looked back. Seeing Mr. Fang standing behind her, she blushed and said, "What are you looking at? Go away. This person sure is nosy. I'm sitting in the corner, and he is still seeing me." Mr. Fang's face twitched. "I'm just passing by on my way to the bathroom. How can you blame me?" Okay, take your time with the practice." "What do you mean by take your time with the practice?" Kellybull flushed in anger. She was the elf queen. How could I use such? She glanced back and saw that Mr. Fang was gone. She changed to other weapons but died several times. Then, after glancing around and seeing that no one was nearby, she secretly took out the breakdance greatsword again. By accident, she attracted the attention of several Pontiff Knights. With tears on her face, she continued to dance awkwardly among them, wishing that she would die fewer times before she could kill them. How come this mystical realm is so difficult? At this moment, First Elder Hyrule was dozing before a big pile of files, so tired. When will Her Majesty return? Finally, Kellybull stood before the church in fatigue. When she pushed open the gate of the church sitting on the highest spot in Irithil, she regained some of her confidence. "I just don't believe I can't dance." With a dark expression, she immediately corrected herself. "Pooh, what awkward dance." At this moment, a group of elves walked over and exclaimed, "Wow, this elf is also using the Farron greatsword. Awesome." A few other elves also came over with stars in their eyes. "You came to this stage already? I just got my hands on the Farron greatsword. How did you do it?" An elf asked in admiration. "I say, how come you guys run to every slightest disturbance?" Mr. Fang asked in disdain while passing by. "Why not?" Kellybull bristled. "What's wrong with my elves coming over to watch me play anyway?" She said immediately, "Ignore him. I'm best with this Farron greatsword. I used the Farron greatsword to kill High Lord Wulner. I'm sure that I can easily defeat this Pontiff too." All the elves looked at her screen expectantly. "Hurry up and beat him. Let's see how well you can dance awkwardly. How come there are so many people here?" Alden and Wilson also walked up, and so did Street Willie, who had just started the game and was being tortured by Gundy. In the huge church, Pontiff Xuanhuan stood in the center of the hall silently. He had two big swords in his hands. One was blazing with profaned flame, and the other emitted dazzling dark moonlight. The two streaks of lights, one red and one purple, seemed to have lit up the dim hall. Pontiff Xuanhuan was tall and thin, and he was wearing a decayed sorcerer's robe and pontiff hat. Soon, Kellybull took out Farron greatsword and began to rotate and leap around him. With an ear-piercing noise, the big sword engulfed in profane flame torn open the darkness like a sharp arrow and instantly came before Kellybull. With fast and agile movements, she suddenly bent her body and narrowly dodged the sword strike. Then, she slashed out her sword horizontally and made Xuanhuan stumble. "Oh!" The audience behind her instantly yelled, "Awesome! Hee hee, ha ha!" Feeling cheerful, she continued to slash and hack. Then, she felt smug, and her character even rolled her eyes at Mr. Fang. At this moment, black horrid flames rose from Xuanhuan's body while huge black wings spread out behind him like tree branches. A black shadow with the same shape as Xuanhuan leapt up into the air like a fallen angel. "Ah, The elf who was dancing awkwardly screamed. She was instantly sent flying by the horrifying black flames. Then, the dark moon sword energy shot out from Xuanhuan's left hand like a laser beam. Boom, boom. Next, the profaned greatsword struck down like a meteorite. Radiant flames rose. Words appeared on the screen. You died. Kellible was at a loss for words. I was careless, again. After getting up at bonfire, Kellible wasn't discouraged. How can I not kill it with the awkward dance? The breakdance greatsword was the #1 sword in the world. You died. Again. You died. She was beaten witless. The audience behind her began to talk. Let's go. She is too noob. There's nothing interesting to watch now. Ah. On the verge of tears, she threw the sword down and said, this sword is garbage. It is a shame that I've practiced the awkward dance every day in secret. Humphrey. At this moment, Mr. Fang stood out with great dignity and said, don't call the sword garbage when you can't use it properly, okay? No one can use this sword to defeat Pontiff. Kellible said with greater dignity, Humphrey, breakdance greatsword. Although this sword had the nickname breakdance greatsword, different people could achieve different results with this sword. If it was used by Artorias, it would be a godly weapon. It was also a great weapon in the hands of Farron's undead legion. It was why Mr. Fang said, it's your fault that you made it into a breakdance greatsword. Don't blame other things. Isn't it just the same sword technique? Kellible said in anger, unwilling to accept what Fang Chi had said. If you can, show me how to use it without dancing awkwardly. Seeing Mr. Fang's hesitation, she was even angrier. You don't dare to show it, then don't judge me. She had the urge to jump up and hit Mr. Fang. I know you're good, but with the same sword technique and the same sword, I don't believe that you can do anything special. Mr. Fang scratched his head and said, I just don't want to make you feel too bad. Chapter 770, Getting a Lesson from Xuanhuan, Teach Him a Lesson with Parry. What? Kellible glared at Mr. Fang with fury in her eyes. Even I, a pinnacle stage saint-level master, have been defeated. With a snort, she pointed at the computer and said, try it. The elves stood behind and watched. Kellible stomped her foot in fury that none of the elves spoke for her. At this moment, Mr. Fang sat down before a computer in the corner. You must use the Farron greatsword. Kellible immediately added another condition. After all, she wasn't stupid, and she was worried that this shop owner might use some lowly tricks to pass the boss. Mr. Fang changed to the Farron greatsword. My goodness. Astonishing. The shop owner is playing the game? The elves immediately walked over. Kellible almost exploded in fury. You guys ran off when I played. How come you are all running over to watch him play? With her hands on her waist, Kellible stood behind Mr. Fang in a huff and glared at the game character who was wearing rags. Such ugly clothes. She commented. Obviously, Mr. Fang was dressed in the master's attire. Huh? The shop owner is playing? Some saint-level masters walked up too. He's going to use this sword. Can he do it? They saw that Mr. Fang had also come to the stage of Pontiff Xuanhuan. They felt better when they realized that they were not left behind. Some of them even smiled since they summoned an NPC to help them skip Xuanhuan. They felt proud now, not knowing that the more they skipped, the more torturous the later stages would be. The shop owner will dance awkwardly too? They talked among themselves in low voices. This elf tried it earlier. It's impossible. He will get a hard lesson. With her acute hearing, Kellible heard the whispers and felt delighted. You dare to try it? I'll see how you will act once you can't pull it off. Mr. Fang spared little attention to the Farron greatsword. Instead, he weighed the small dagger in his other hand for a while as if he was trying to feel it out. Then, he walked into Pontiff Xuanhuan's chamber. The cathedral was very big, and Xuanhuan was in the very depths of it, at least 60 meters from the gate. The place was deadly silent. Pontiff Xuanhuan silently stood in the center of the hall like a skeleton. He seemed to be waiting for his enemies. When Pontiff Xuanhuan and Mr. Fang's character were only about 30 meters apart, flames lit up on the two big swords. In the blink of an eye, the firelight from the profaned greatsword shot across the 30 meters between them and toward Fang Chi like a lightning flash piercing through darkness. Everyone watched the strike without blinking. Usually, the players encountering Xuanhuan's sudden strike for the first time would be caught by surprise. They usually couldn't dodge and would panic. However, in her previous battles, Kellybull had dodged it with Farron Greatsword. Right now, Mr. Fang had the Farron Greatsword in his hand, which meant that he should be able to. He isn't moving. The audience suddenly saw Fang Chi staying where he was without moving a muscle. In fact, he was directly walking towards Xuanhuan one step at a time. Is it possible that this guy doesn't even know how to dance awkwardly? Kellybull mumbled to herself. The moment she said that, Fang Chi lifted his left hand that was holding the dagger instead of the Farron Greatsword in his right hand. Ding! The huge sword collided with the dagger, and a series of metal colliding noises sounded while sparks flew in all directions. Is he crazy? The audience all exclaimed. Even a moron knew what would happen when a dagger was used to block a huge sword. However, the viewers suddenly saw the profaned greatsword in Xuanhuan's hand moving to one side. Then, it was viciously bounced off. This is... Kellybull suddenly remembered that the same thing had happened to her when she dealt with the sword master. She had felt as if all her force was bounced back into her body, and she couldn't muster any strength, as if her whole body was instantly crushed. This is it? She stared at the screen with widened eyes. Sure enough, in the next moment, Kellybull discovered that Xuanhuan was in the same state as she had once been. For an instant, Xuanhuan couldn't move. Fang Chi lifted his Farron Greatsword and hacked down with vicious force. Crack! This strike left a horrifying wound in Xuanhuan's body. Xuanhuan became cautious and didn't strike out casually. On the other hand, Fang Chi casually walked in the cathedral while he confronted his opponent. Like a ghost, Xuanhuan moved around Fang Chi, trying to find a chance to strike. Like a lightning flash, his sword thrust out from an impossible angle from the side. Ah! This strike caught everyone by surprise. Before they could react, the strike was parried. The Farron Greatsword hacked down again and almost cut off Xuanhuan's head from his extremely hard body. Everyone stared at the screen in a daze. Is it the Farron Greatsword that you're using? Black blazing flames shot out like the water out of a fountain. As if he had been anticipating this, Fang Chi moved back and dodged it. A dark shadow that looked like a dark angel split from Xuanhuan's body, and the two profaned greatswords burned with blazing flames around them as if they would burn up everything in the world. Flames shot into the ground, and the surging flames forced Fang Chi to retreat a few steps. At this moment, Mr. Fang explained on the side, "You asked me how to defeat Xuanhuan. Use parry. Who said that you can't use parry with the breakdance greatsword? Who's the first person that taught you how to parry? Do you know Hawkwood, the crestfallen warrior sitting beside the thrones of Lords of Cinder?" Mr. Fang said, "That deserter escaped from the Farron's breakdance crew. How can you say that you know how to use the breakdance sword if you can't parry?" In the next instant, the Pontiff and the Phantom struck down with their profaned greatswords at the same time. Mr. Fang slightly shifted to one side and dodged the Black Shadow's huge sword, which fell like a waterfall of flames. Then, he parried Xuanhuan's sword with the other hand. Another heavy sword strike was used. So, when you get a lesson from Xuanhuan, give him a lesson back with parry. Fang Chi said. Everyone behind him fell silent. The close-range combat system in Dark Souls was similar to that in Devil May Cry. There weren't many ranged techniques, but if the players combined the concentrated strength, speed, and skills, the attacks would be horrifying. Even gods, whose tremendous godly power enabled them to use lethal ranged skills, could be blocked. Humans who had weaker strength thought of a way to deal with these moves. Parry was a special skill like the release in Devil May Cry. The difference was that no humans could possibly master release, but the parry could be used by humans in real life. There was parry and spell parry, and the system had perfectly recreated them. Parry was the skill that the sword master used on Kellybull. It could instantly block the attack and use the recoil force to shock the opponent's body, instantly immobilizing the attacker by afflicting violent shock to the body and the internal organs. With special shields, the players could also parry spells and ranged attacks, but the effects were not as good. Of course, parry could only be used when very strict conditions were met. The series of movements must be finished in the instant when the weapons collided, otherwise, the defender would most likely get hurt. Perhaps. Before being buried, the main character wasn't weak. The main character in the game could parry with shields that were fitting for parry and could even parry with his arm, which showed that he was proficient with parrying. The players only needed to find the perfect moment to use it. This skill greatly decreased the difficulty level of this battle. However, defeating Xuanhuan this way. "Do you think I'm a god?" Kellybull screamed silently in her mind.